Hello. Today we're going to have a mini course over Adult Education 101, Tips for Training Adults in Today's Workforce. This mini lesson was designed to introduce you to the basic principles and concepts of adult learning theories and help you apply those principles in your professional life. We will get started with some of the objectives that we have for this mini lesson. There are only two. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe and compare different learning theories, and you will be able to articulate the principles of adult learning. Then let's get started with our adult learner assumptions. These came from the noted adult learning theorist Knowles. And in 1984, Knowles made 4 assumptions about the characteristics of adult learners that are different from the assumptions that we have about child learners. And in 1984, Knowles added his 5th assumption. The first assumption is that of self-concept, which states that as a person matures, his or her self-concept moves from one of being a dependent personality toward one of being a self-directed or independent human being. The second assumption we have is that of adult learner experience. And that states that as a person matures, they accumulate a growing reservoir of experience that becomes an increasing resource for their learning. So adults learn through their experiences. The third assumption is that of a readiness to learn, where a person matures and his or her readiness to learn becomes oriented increasingly to the developmental tasks of their social roles. So they learn so that they can benefit not only themselves, but society. The fourth adult learner assumption is that of the orientation to learning, and states that as a person matures, his or her time perspective changes from one of a postponed application of knowledge to the immediacy of the application of knowledge. And accordingly, their orientation towards learning shifts from being one subject centered to one of being problem centered. And the fifth learning assumption that we have about adult learners is that of the motivation to learn, which is simply as a person matures, their motivation to learn becomes internal. And I've got a couple of definitions for you. I provided the definition of andragogy, which is the art and science of helping adults learn, which is what Knowles is very well known for. And then I provided the definition for pedagogy, which is the art and science of helping children learn. So it's all about children learners. Next, we're going to have a little bit of application where you can see some of the various adult learning principles, and I'll provide you some tips for incorporating those principles into the real world. The first learning principle we're going to talk about is that adults bring life experience and knowledge to their learning environment. And a good way for you to incorporate this principle into your own training is to use case studies and incorporate audience involvement and participation in your training session. The next principle is that adults learn best when they can relate new knowledge and information with that information that they have previously gained and learned. And a great way to incorporate prior knowledge is to create or use a refresher course for older topics. Just let your learners know that I realize you've learned this in the past. This is just to bring you back up to speed. And you can also ask them questions and use small groups to facilitate discussion. The third principle we want to talk about is that adults tend to prefer self-directed learning, which they want to be able to move forward in a course, go back as they may need to in a course at their own pace. And a great way to apply this learning principle is to create an online training using the materials you want your learners to learn. And then the fourth principle we're going to talk about is that adults want practical, problem-centered learning that can immediately help them deal with challenges in life. And a great way to incorporate this principle into your daily practice is to incorporate group discussions and provide relevant course materials and information to your learners. And these adult learning principles came from Russell and Russell in 2009. Now we're just going to wrap up this mini lesson, and I have a couple of takeaways that I hope you will internalize and take with you. And those are that adults do learn differently than children. That is that andragogy mindset versus the pedagogy mindset. Then make sure you incorporate the various learning styles into your trainings, whether that's your learners are more visual learners, they're more auditory learners, or they're kinesthetic and really hands-on. Just do your best to incorporate activities that cater to all learning styles. And then please take away the various methods for implementing adult learning principles into your classroom or your training session. And that would be using case studies, group discussions, online trainings, provide instructor feedback, what you think they did really well, what you think that they could improve on, and so forth.